What's up, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Goal Line Dynasty. Today, Tyler and I are doing a bit of a dumpster dive on running backs for you guys. We're taking a look at some running backs that you can get pretty darn late in those startups right now, or really cheap in the trade market because, you know, in the offseason, running backs arguably have the lowest value out of any position in all of fantasy. And then as we get into the season, I think their value kind of skyrockets because people realize, oh shit, I do need to play running backs, right? But before we get into the video, Tyler, how are we doing, buddy?
I'm great. I mean, this is my favorite way to approach startups is by going, bunch of running backs late. So we are trying to find the diamonds in the rough here that are gonna get us through till we find our long-term staples there while we let our wide receivers dominate. So if you're agreeing with that strategy, then the video is going to be useful for you.
All right, so I'm going to get into the first one here, and it's going to be Antonio Gibson. He is ranked the RB39 on Keep Trade Cut, and also in a one-for-one, he is worth the 208. Now, the thing with Gibson is, I mean, the hate, I think, has gone too far, right? He just finished as the RB27 in PPR. The last 2 years, he finished as the RB12 and the RB13 in PPR. Now, obviously, that was before Brian Robinson came along, but we know that he has the talent. We've seen it. You know, it's been showcased. He has been a fantasy darling before. And I'm not saying that going after a guy like Antonio Gibson, you're going to get an RB1 return. But him repeating as maybe around that RB27 mark, it's not that far-fetched at all, right? So there's a lot of upside there. He's got the standalone value because between him and Brian Robinson, I know they brought in Chris Rodriguez as well, but he's just a fifth-round running back, right? We probably shouldn't be too worried about him. He's just going to be kind of like a depth guy in case one of them gets hurt. But Antonio Gibson is going to have standalone value because he's going to be splitting carries with Brian Robinson, and he's likely going to be on the field for most of those third downs because he is a supremely better pass catcher than Brian Robinson is, right? So especially in the PPR leagues, he's got the big upside. And then the really big thing with Antonio Gibson is, dude, like if Brian Robinson goes down with injury, Antonio Gibson is going right back to where we saw him 2 years ago, and he immediately slots into, I would say, at the very worst, a top 20 weekly play, right, if something happens to Brian Robinson. So just a lot to like about Antonio Gibson. You're getting like a poor man's flex option out of him most weeks, but if there's an injury on this Washington roster, I mean, it's wheels up for Gibson.
Yeah, and I really used to like Antonio Gibson. You know, he like you said, he was a fantasy darling at one point, and he was a guy that a lot of people were waiting on, a real RB1 season, and never panned out. Ron Rivera doesn't really like him, due to his fumbling issues. But I mean, those 5 fumbles, I mean, usually don't it's a random stat. Usually you don't see it in careers. I do like Brian Robinson coming in there, and I think that because Washington Commanders, I couldn't think of their name for a second, because the Commanders do like Brian Robinson. I think I would probably shy away from Antonio Gibson, but he is much easier to get than Brian Robinson in startups and probably on the trade market right now as well. My guy here is going to be James Conner. He's a guy who's also valued right there at the 209. I just got him at the 911 in a startup, and on a points per game basis last year, James Conner was a top 10 back. So I'm going to take that all day here, a 28-year-old guy. And a lot of that was correlated directly to Kyler Murray's injury. He got a really big workload and had a couple spike weeks in terms of his receiving workload as well. He was very, very elite, really, at the end of the season last year when they were leaning on him. And he doesn't have any competition this year. So I think in terms of, you're going to get a real hot start from him. And while Kyler's recovering, I think that's going to continue on throughout the season. They're going to lean on him. So I know you like James Conner, and I love the cost that he's going for right now. If you're a contending roster and you can send the 209 for James Conner and someone's looking for that reroll, I'm taking that all day.
Yeah, dude, as a contender, James Conner is pretty much a must buy at cost. I think anybody who needs a really solid RB2, trading away a late second round pick really is not the end of the world. James Conner, I mean, you're going to get some spike weeks out of him for sure. There's going to be some weeks where he finds the end zone at least twice. And I think on top of that, you're getting a pretty safe floor because, like you said, with Kyler out at the start of the year, he's going to have a bigger workload. Just the lack of competition behind him, he's going to have a bigger workload. So I would consider him a pretty safe floor option as well. So nothing wrong with taking him, even as high as your RB2, right, in the late 9th, early 10th round there. Moving into my second guy here, it's going to be Damien Harris, right? So Damien Harris, he recently signed with the Buffalo Bills. He is basically taking over the Devin Singletary role. Now, there is a distinct difference between him and Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary catches balls. Damien Harris really doesn't. He only has 38 targets, or 50 targets through 38 career games in the NFL. So not really a lot to like about him from a PPR standpoint, but as a true running back, Damien Harris is pretty awesome, right? You go back just 2 years ago, right? In the 2021 season, in standard leagues, not that any of us are playing in standard leagues, but in standard leagues, he was the RB8. And in PPR leagues, he was the RB14. Like, I know that seems like an eternity ago, but Damien Harris was an RB1 in fantasy football just 2 seasons ago. And I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting that. Now, like I said, he's not going to be catching passes from Josh Allen too often. That's going to be James Cook's role. And James Cook is going to have a large role in this offense. But Damien Harris, he's going to be their short yard guy. He's going to be their goal line guy. I don't know exactly how efficient he's going to be, but if history kind of repeats itself, his lowest yards per carry over the last 3 seasons was 4.4, which is still pretty damn good. So I like him. I got him. Where did I get him in our startup? The 14th round. Early 14th round. I think that's a very fair price to pay for Damien Harris. And in a Buffalo offense that scores a shit ton of touchdowns, Damien Harris, I'm not saying he's going to do this, but Damien Harris could be this year's Jamal Williams. So I really like him at that point in the draft.
Yeah, Damien Harris, like you said, I mean, he showed it to us a couple years ago, and there's no reason he can't show it again. Buffalo hasn't really committed to much at the running back position. So I think that you get any piece of that backfield and it could work out for you. I know everybody's focused on James Cook right now. So I would definitely go after and chase Damien Harris late there when you're looking at no names. So here I'm going to talk about Tajai Spears, guy out of Tulane, came in a little bit light in the combine, but I think there's just such a clear path to targets for him. Really carries rather. I mean, Derrick Henry has missed time in the past, and he's getting to that age where he may not be able to handle a full workload anymore. I mean, it happens to everybody eventually. Father Time is always going to win. And I mean, Tajai Spears just got really decent draft capital, getting drafted top 90. So he was a pretty high investment from the team in terms of what running backs are going for nowadays. Obviously not comparable to the guys we love like Bijan and Gibbs, but I mean, at this price, I think Tajai Spears is one of those guys that just has the clearest path to a workload. And I mean, he's not going to be catching many passes, I don't think, out of the backfield. I mean, I think they're going to find another running back to do that. He's just never really shown it. But I'm with Tajai Spears in terms of him over, Kendre Miller and Tank Bigsby. I think that Tajai Spears is the one who is likely to be an Alexander Madison type that can really end up putting 20 points a game for you when you know to put him in your lineup.
Yeah, I like the call on Tajai Spears. I mean, I wouldn't go as far to say I'm taking him over Kendre Miller, but I would agree that I'm higher on Tajai Spears than I think a lot of people are. My initial reaction after the NFL draft was I had Spears as I think my rookie RB4 after he landed in Tennessee on day 2, right? The only drawback with Tajai Spears and the only reason why he is so cheap is because his ACL or lack thereof, right? I believe he just physically doesn't have an ACL in one of his legs, right? So there's definitely a risk associated, but it's baked into his cost, right? And I don't think spending an early 14th round pick in a startup or trading away, a mid to late second round rookie pick is too much for Tajai Spears. So I do like that call. And like you said, I mean, if Derrick Henry goes down, or maybe even this time next year, if Derrick Henry is not with the Titans, could be a lot to like about Spears in his game. So it's a good call right there. My third guy, weird one, really weird one. Not anyone that I ever thought I would be talking about on a Dynasty video. And maybe he's more of a redraft call, right? But you're only looking for a 1 to 3 year window out of a majority of the running backs you get in Dynasty anyway, right? Like you go out, you get a guy like Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs or Breece Hall. Yes, those are guys that can give you that 4 to 6 year window. Those guys are rare. But for the most part, if you can get 2, maybe even 3 years out of a Dynasty running back, you're going to be pretty excited. And I think you could get at least 1 solid year out of Samaje Perine for the Denver Broncos. Currently, the RB49 on Keep Trade Cut, worth only the 302. Now, he has landed in Denver, and we already know Javonte Williams is not healthy. There are OTA reports saying, oh, Javonte looks great, Javonte's doing awesome, but they still can't commit to him being ready for training camp. And I don't even know if they would be able to commit to him being ready for week 1. If he is going to be hobbled and he's going to have some sort of limited work role or limited workload in this offense. If he doesn't start in week 1, Samaje Perine is going to be a direct beneficiary of that, and he could have a workhorse role until Javonte comes back. And then when Javonte does come back, Sean Payton is their coach. Sean Payton is famous for having 2 running backs on the field at any given time, right? Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, they did all of their damage when Sean Payton was coach. And I'm not saying Samaje Perine is Mark Ingram, but he could be used very similar to him, right, in Sean Payton's offense. So I think there's a lot to like there. Denver is going to be, arguably one of the NFL's most improved teams in 2023 under this new coaching staff. So a lot to like there. And then a small sample size from Samaje Perine, but he started 3 games last year. Week 11, week 12, week 13 against Pittsburgh, Tennessee, and Kansas City. In those 3 games, he put up 30 PPR points, 19 PPR points, and 21 PPR points. Like I said, I'm not expecting a league-winning result from Samaje Perine, but you're practically getting him for free in the 16th round of Superflex startups right now, and you could get him for free in the trade market.
So I'm going to move on to Rashad Penny here. He's a guy, I don't even really know how much I have to say because everybody knows just how talented he is, and everybody's been waiting for a fully healthy season. We caught a glimpse of it a couple years back when he had an end of the year that he was healthy. But I think that like him and DeAndre Swift like do complete opposite things and like don't really cut into each other very much. I think that Rashad Penny is going to be the first and second down guy and probably the goal line guy that just pounded in, and DeAndre Swift's going to be the scat back, just because that's what the situation would naturally lend itself to. But I mean, given the price, it's nothing. He's going in the 16th round in startups. He's probably equivalent to a 3rd round pick, if that. I paid a 2nd round pick for him 2 years ago, so I'm sure it's probably worse at this point. I like Rashad Penny at the price, and I like what the upside could be. There's not really very many backs that are going that late and for that price that have the amount of upside that Rashad Penny does. So if I'm swinging for the fences, I like to take Rashad Penny and hope that he turns into $1. You like that one?
I do. I like that one a lot. I always love a good fantasy football pun there. But no, I mean, to your point, everyone knows what Rashad Penny is. It's just a matter of can he stay healthy and can he battle DeAndre Swift, who is also always in the question of can he stay healthy, right, for these touches. So I think there's a lot to like there, especially because DeAndre Swift goes in like the 5th, 6th, maybe 7th round of certain startups. Rashad Penny, you're getting him 10 rounds later. So might as well go for it. I like that call. I like that call a lot there. I got one more for you guys here today, and it's going to be Devin Singletary. I kind of brought him up briefly when I was talking about Damien Harris and how he went to Buffalo. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Devin Singletary as well. Currently RB53 on Keep Trade Cut. He is worth the 303 in rookie picks. So in other words, he's basically free. I recently got him with the second to last pick of the 17th round of our Superflex startup, and I'm pretty stoked about it. I mean, he's not going to return. He's not going to do what he did in Buffalo, right? In Buffalo, he had back-to-back top 24 seasons in PPR. I don't foresee that happening in Houston, but I also don't think any of us would be surprised if he did, right? He's competing with Dameon Pierce for touches, and Dameon Pierce is definitely going to stay on the field more often than not in Houston. But Devin Singletary is a much better pass catcher. So I think he can go out there. He can be the third down, back between those two. And I do think he is going to eat into Pierce's touches on first and second down to some extent. So he is going to see at least some sort of workload. Last year and the year before that, he saw around 180 carries. I don't necessarily know if that's possible. Maybe closer to 140 to 150 while he's sharing the field with Dameon Pierce. But he does have 3 seasons in a row of 50 targets or more, I should say. And I think that's a fair projection to say that he'll get in Houston, especially with a rookie quarterback coming in and needing to take those safer options, which is going to come in the form of Devin Singletary. So, if you need a bench running back and you need someone to take a flyer on, Devin Singletary is the perfect guy. And, the one trend with pretty much all of these guys that we went over in today's video is if their counterpart goes down with injury, each one of these guys skyrockets in weekly value, right? Like if something happens to Dameon Pierce, Devin Singletary is an awesome play. If something happens to James Cook, Damien Harris is an awesome play. Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, right? So it's just one of those things where when I'm taking late round running backs, I try to go for standalone value if I can, but I also see, okay, if there's just one injury on this roster, can I benefit from that? And I think the answer with pretty much all of our guys here today is, yeah, you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find standalone value that late. You have to really kind of just take a bunch of them and hope you get lucky that a guy falls into the right situation. I mean, so much of the NFL is not even about talent because all the guys are talented. It's just about who's in the best situation, really, to produce and to make that happen. I mean, like even you look back to Zeke's dominant years. Like, was Zeke an excellent running back, an all-time running back? Yes. Was he also behind an all-time offensive line and a coordinator who wanted to run behind that? Yes, he was. So, there are talented guys who go to waste all the time, and guys who find themselves in great spots that they can make the most out of it, who aren't as talented, but still get the job done. So, I like my shots trying to get lucky down here.
Yeah. And, kind of like we alluded to, it seems like a lot of people these days kind of punt the running back position over the first 3, 4, maybe even 5 rounds of their startups these days. And if you are someone that does do that, the guys on these lists, they could offer a lot of dividends a little bit later on in those drafts. So if you do want to fill up on your receivers, your quarterbacks, your tight ends, go ahead and do it and take a shot on some of these guys because all 7 of them are not going to hit. I'll tell you that right now. We're going to have some misses in this video, right? But for the cost that you're paying for each one of these guys, if you leave a draft with, I would say 3 to 4 of them, you should be pretty ecstatic and feel confident that at least one of them is going to do something for you in 2023 and maybe even beyond. So, just something to think about with these guys is that their value can't be any lower, right? They can only help themselves throughout the 2023 season.
Yeah, and I don't, like you said, you don't want one of them. You want a lot of them so that one falls into the right situation. But yeah, I think we pointed out some solid guys and guys that I'm mostly targeting. I think another highlight, I would also say Chase Brown. I think he's a guy who in redraft I've drafted a ton of. I have him on like over 50% of my my underdog drafts for best ball this year because the questions with Joe Mixon. He again is a guy who he could honestly just take workload away from Joe Mixon on his own. But if Joe Mixon gets in legal trouble or isn't playing for the Bengals anymore, then there's a really good chance that Chase Brown scores a lot of fantasy points. But
yeah,
it popped in my head.
No, I'm glad you point him out as kind of a bonus here before we do our sign off because Chase Brown, I think Chase Brown's value is going to go up as we inch closer into the season. I think we're already fading Joe Mixon, right? Not just me and you. It seems like most people are fading Joe Mixon. So the natural reaction is going to be Chase Brown slowly getting pushed up draft board. So if you're going to go after Chase Brown, I would suggest doing it sooner rather than later because I don't see any possible way that his value drops in the next few months. But yeah, so that's going to do it for us on our video today. Hopefully these 7 or 8 running backs can kind of help you guys out through those startup drafts or navigate through the trade market this offseason if you are in need of the running back position. But for myself, for Tyler, and for Goal Line Dynasty, we will see you next time.